Farm Week is a production of the Mississippi State University Extension Service.
Today on Farm Week, a respected ag policy group is predicting lower prices next year without much improvement in the following years.
Frogeye leaf spot was a hot topic at the Verona field day.
In southern gardening, Zahara zinnias. They'll live in your hottest, driest spot.
In the food factor, we'll have some tips to improve your tailgating.
In the markets, cattle futures are supported by lower corn prices. While the wheat pit remains nervous over tension between Russia and Ukraine, Brian Williams has analysis.
In the feature segment, Aquaponics. It joins fish farming and hydroponic plant farming into one system. Both support the other.
You get very fast growth rates out of the plants, but you also get two products, fish and plants, and the combination of those two can make you more profitable.
Good day, everyone. I'm Leighton Spann.
And I'm Artis Ford. Welcome to Farm Week. A respected ag policy group is predicting price weakness in 2015.
Artis, FAPRI says it looks for continued weakness in row crop prices with moderation predicted for cattle prices. FAPRI is short for the Food and Policy Research Institute at the University of Missouri and Iowa State University. FAPRI says it looks for corn prices to hover at a season average $3.89 a bushel for 2015. Then it will hover around $4 through 2020. Turning to soybeans, FAPRI projects 2015 prices may drop below $10 a bushel. From 2016 to 2020, they will range between $10.30 to $10.69 a bushel. Lower feed costs are expected to prompt livestock producers to increase production. This should result eventually in lower meat prices. If meat prices moderate, FAPRI says food price inflation could drop to less than 2% next year.
Mississippi farmers at the recent Verona field day had a lot of questions this year about handling fungal problems in soybeans. Frogeye leaf spot often starts to show in the latter half of the growing season. Farm Week's Amy Taylor reports from the Ag Row Crops field day.
Mississippi State University Extension Service researchers and specialists at the Ag Row Crops field day emphasized the importance of selecting the right soybean varieties as well as avoiding fungal disease like frog-eye leaf spot. MSU Extension soybean specialist Trent Irby discusses maturity group selection, while Associate Extension Professor Tom Allen talks about frog-eye leaf spot.
Maturity group selection is one of the most important decisions, I guess, variety selection as well as planting date. When we look at the planting window in soybeans in Mississippi, we have a very large window from early April all the way up through June. We typically see soybeans planted. All the research suggests, both research conducted several years ago as well as some of the more recent research conducted in multi-states project indicate that planting a maturity group 4 soybean during that early portion of the window, the April to early May portion of the window, we'll see a yield benefit from just simply planting the appropriate variety at the appropriate time.
Frog-eye leaf spot is certainly a concern in Mississippi at this point because that fungus has developed resistance to the main fungicide class that's used as a preventative product for farmers. That's something the Soybean Promotion Board has funded a project and a graduate student is working on to determine how widespread the resistance to that class of fungicides is throughout the state, and as of right now I think we're at 49 confirmed total counties with fungicide resistance.
To avoid that problem, Allen recommends growers rotate to a non-host crop like corn or cotton, or plant a variety that's resistant to frog-eye leaf spot. From Verona, Mississippi, I'm Amy Taylor reporting.
Fall in the South means one thing: football season. And for many fans, tailgating at a game is a mandatory activity. In this episode of The Food Factor, Natasha Haynes of the Mississippi State University Extension Service tells us how to make the most of tailgating this season with family and friends.
Tailgate season. Are you ready for the kickoff? Tailgate parties can be lots of fun with good food and good friends. But don't let foodborne illness spoil your fun. The physical effects of a foodborne illness can hit quickly or days after consuming food that has not been properly handled. Some of the more at-risk foods include meats, milk products, and eggs, or food that contains those items. Do not leave these foods out for more than 2 hours. Bring water for cleaning if none will be available. Pack disposable wipes, hand sanitizers, and paper towels for cleaning hands and surfaces. Carry cold perishable food like raw hamburger patties, sausage, and chicken in an insulated cooler packed with several inches of ice or containers of ice. Be sure raw meat and poultry are wrapped securely to prevent their juices from cross-contaminating ready-to-eat food. If possible, store these foods near the bottom of the cooler so that juices do not contaminate other food in the cooler. If you can't keep hot food hot during the drive to your tailgate, plan and chill the food in the refrigerator before packing it in a cooler. Reheat the food to 165 degrees as measured with a food thermometer. Watch the clock on ready-to-eat and fast food too. This type of food should be purchased just before the party and eaten within 2 hours. Or purchase these foods in advance, refrigerate them until party time, and then reheat them. Have fun and support your team at your next tailgate party, but also be a fan of food safety. Remember, when in doubt, throw it out. It's time to make healthy food a factor in your life.
Whether at the tailgate or in your own kitchen, washing your hands frequently is the best way to prevent cross-contamination between foods.
Are you looking for a flowering annual that takes the summer heat? In this week's Southern Gardening segment, Extension Horticulturist Dr. Gary Bachman will show us how the Zahara Zinnia can provide season-long color.
Today I'm at MSU's South Mississippi Branch Station in Poplarville, checking out the Zahara Zinnia in the trial gardens. Zahara Zinnia are tolerant of hot and droughty conditions, and that's good for our Mississippi gardens. Zahara Zinnia are great choices for providing annual color in the landscape. The selections in the Zahara series are well branched to support the abundant flowering. There's a wide range of new colors including yellow, white, and scarlet. A favorite of mine is Starlight Rose. This is a bicolor selection of white petals with a splash of deep rose shining from the center. However, the deep rose coloration is variable in hot weather. But perhaps the most exciting are the double flower selections. Double Cherry has deep magenta blooms, while Double Fire is a hot scarlet orange. Both double Zaharas have centers that lighten as the flowers mature. Zahara Zinnia should be planted in the full sun, knowing the color will not bleach out. In many areas of Mississippi, planting in raised beds will result in superior plant growth and flowering all summer long. These are low-maintenance flowering bedding plants. Transplanted in the landscape, Zahara Zinnia will quickly provide a blanket of color. And one of the best features of these plants is deadheading is seldom necessary. Planting Zahara Zinnia is one way to help make the summer landscape more beautiful with its season-long color. I'm Gary Bachman for Southern Gardening.
Now, Zahara Zinnias are tough. They will thrive alongside hot driveways or walkways. They will bloom within 9 to 10 weeks if you plant them from seed. In the feature segment today, most of us have heard of fish farming and hydroponic vegetable production. Well, what happens when you combine the two? Aquaponics. Time now for the Markets with Leighton. You say the tensions in the Ukraine are affecting the wheat market?
Well, we're going to see if that's still a factor in today's market interview. Stay with us. Also in the headlines this week, firmer demand sustains feeder cattle. Lower prices threaten soybeans, while the nation's big corn crop is projected to get even bigger. As we produce this program Thursday morning, feeder cattle are enjoying higher prices, thanks in part to a strong tumble in grain prices. Analyst Darren Newsom says good demand is also at play in this market. Despite all these positives, Darren's long-term position, however, seems to be watch and wait.
Coming from the live cattle market on the idea that we're still going to have great demand for the feeder cattle. And you've got corn market that just isn't going anywhere. And as we talked about with that previous question, the best odds are that it's going to go down, at least short term. So similar situation here in the fall months. You get a little bit of a rally, gaining back some of what's been lost over the last few weeks. You probably look to go ahead and sell it. Maybe sit back a little bit on the deferred contracts, the winter contracts, maybe even the spring contracts to a certain degree, till we see what really starts to develop.
Well, there's quite a contrast these days between the dairy business in America compared within the United Kingdom. Here, U.S. milk farmers are said to be enjoying some profitable times. However, over in Britain, producers are facing a huge milk surplus and plunging farm gate prices. The problem there in the dairy business is said to be twofold. First, China has reduced purchases from the UK, and second, Russia has stopped buying milk from Britain due to the sanctions involving the Ukraine situation. Well, let's break from the markets to look at our trivia quiz for this week. Here's the question. What year was the first frozen food sold at retail in the United States? Is the answer A, 1927, or B, 1930, C, 1941, or D, 1950? I'll tell you at the end of the markets.
We're going to pause for a short break on Farm Week. Coming up, we'll look at the calendar and the rest of the markets. Leighton Span reports there's more downside risk to soybeans, and the Ukraine situation is affecting wheat prices. In the feature segment today, Aquaponics. It combines fish farming and hydroponic vegetable production into one system.
Hey, do you see something cool? Sure. Coming home.
Before we get back to the markets, let's look at the Farm Week calendar. The annual Muscadine Field Day takes place next Saturday, September 13th. The location is the Mississippi State University McNeil Research Unit on Ben Gill Road at Carriere. Carriere is between Poplarville and Picayune. You'll learn about fruit, plant trellises, plant spacing, production practices, insects, and disease. Scientists from MSU and the U.S. Department of Agriculture will be on hand to answer questions. Once again, that's Saturday, September 13th. The annual Mississippi Gourd Festival is Saturday and Sunday, September 20th and 21st in Raleigh. The location is the Smith County Ag Complex off Highway 35 on Smith County Road 77. There will be vendors selling handcrafted gourds and dried gourds. There will also be classes available to learn various ways to craft gourds. It will be held indoors with air conditioning. Go to the Mississippi Gourd Society website for information and to sign up for classes. And our Farm Week website, farmweek.msucares.com, will have more information on these and other events. Now check out this week's Farm Week Snapshot.
As private estimates continue to point to a larger U.S. soybean crop, the market continues to inch down, closer to $10. Analyst Tom Fitzenmeyer says he doesn't see that price trend changing. Tom also says he doesn't see any merit to the idea there will be significant frost damage to bean crops in the north this fall, and that such a development will help boost prices somewhat.
It looks to me like there's a lot of downside in beans from this level. We're going to maintain a weather premium for a while, but you know, the odds of ruining a bean crop from frost, I mean, if it hits your farm and you get nipped, there's obviously some problems, but ruining a crop probably isn't going to be a problem.
The theory that big crops get bigger looks to be holding. A pair of private firms have now released this week survey-based projections of this year's U.S. corn and soybean crops. As you see, the numbers are larger than the USDA's last guess. For example, Allendale sees corn at 14.40 billion bushels. FC Stone estimates the corn crop of 14.59 billion. And the USDA's last estimate for corn, released back in August, was 14.03 bushels. The government's next projection of the U.S. crop will be out on Thursday, September 11th. The wheat trade has been closely watching the situation unfold in the Ukraine. On Thursday morning, Extension Ag economist Brian Williams discussed whether this tension is fading a bit as a significant market factor for wheat. What impact is the continuing tension between Russia and Ukraine having on the wheat market?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern there, and from several different avenues looking at this issue there. One thing to keep in mind is that Russia and Ukraine together account for about 20% of the world's wheat exports. The sanctions that were put in place a few weeks ago really didn't have too much of an impact on the U.S. market here. But something else to think about is there were also sanctions put on the banks in Russia, and that could make it difficult for Russian producers to get loans for next year, and so it could hurt production there next year. Another thing to think about is that there's some potential for additional sanctions in the future. President Obama is meeting at a NATO summit as we speak, and there's no doubt they're discussing additional sanctions, but whether or not that's going to impact agriculture, we really don't know yet.
So this situation could bring more wheat sales to the United States potentially?
There's definitely that potential there. As I mentioned, Russia's a huge player in the global market, and they're expecting a big crop this year. There's also concerns in the Black Sea of them being able to, both Russia and Ukraine being able to get that crop out. Right now they're still able to, but if they have trouble in the future, that could bring more business here.
As we've gotten into September, has that market kind of trended a little more south as far as the prices, or at least this week it has?
Well, we saw the wheat prices come down over the course of the summer, but they kind of leveled off and even tried to rally a couple times in August. But over the last week or so, we've seen them start coming back down a little bit again.
How is the U.S. dollar index playing into this market?
Well, the dollar's been real strong lately, particularly compared to the euro and the Japanese yen. And where that really plays into the market is that while it's good for a U.S. consumer, it's not so good for farmers because it makes our wheat more expensive to potential customers.
You would say the market's probably going to stay about where it is right now, maybe?
For now, it looks like it, yeah.
The number of gasoline stations nationwide offering the E15 ethanol blend could soon break 100. Production company Growth Energy says the forthcoming addition of some stations in the Southeast, in Atlanta and South Florida, will help push E15 past the 100 mark as far as number of total outlets. E15 is also coming soon to Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio in Texas. Before the feature story, let's check out the trivia answer for you for this week. And the correct choice is B. Frozen food under the trade name Bird's Eye was first sold at retail in 1930 in Massachusetts.
Well, many are aware of fish farming, but when you combine it with hydroponic vegetable production, it's called aquaponics. The Aztecs in Mexico may have been some of the first to try it. Today you'll meet a Midwestern entrepreneur who first looked at aquaponics as a hobby, but he's ramped up his operation since. Market to Market's Josh Bittner explains.
You may not envision fish tanks on the prairie as the best place to look for added value amidst large agricultural operations. Nevertheless, some folks in America's heartland are giving it a try. Whether it's a hobby developed during the off-season or an entrepreneurial foray into niche markets, sustainable, self-sufficient aquaponics systems are hatching in some unexpected locations. Though history suggests a rudimentary form of aquaponics existed in ancient civilizations, the modern blending of aquaculture and hydroponics has increased steadily since the late 1990s. Industry standards were developed at the University of the Virgin Islands, where the warm climate facilitated large-scale operations. Further north, though, the use of indoor aquaponics as a hedge against extreme summer heat doesn't seem that far-fetched to some. the symbiotic closed-loop method offers the opportunity to turn a small profit by growing crops typically cultivated in other regions of the country.
Aquaponics is popular as a concept now and is going to be popular as an industry practice very soon. I would say in the next 20 years we're going to have a lot of our produce in the Midwest coming from aquaponics.
Higher education has continued research into the science of this hybrid discipline. Promising scenarios have emerged for one-time curiosities to evolve into viable green operations.
Aquaponics is a synergistic relationship between plants and fish. Basically, you feed the fish food. That protein then breaks down into nitrate that can be used by the plants, and the plants strip the nitrate from the water, cleans up the water for the fish, and then the whole cycle continues.
An emphasis on education and conservation are central to the mission of the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Located on the campus of Iowa State University, the center seeks to reduce negative environmental impacts associated with farming and develop new revenue streams for producers. Leopold Center funding supports extension outreach efforts like those of fisheries and aquaculture specialist Alan Patillo. He and other instructors educate and advise students and the public on the science, economics, and marketing aspects of sustainable aquaculture.
A lot of people wonder, how do you grow plants in water whenever you can overwater a plant and it starts to die? Well, the reason is we maintain a higher oxygen concentration in the water than you would be able to maintain in the soil. You get very fast growth rates out of the plants, but you also get two products, fish and plants, and the combination of those two can make you more profitable.
All kinds of plants can be grown in this environment, though herbs and leafy greens currently are the most common crop. And for those lured to try their luck raising fish, a certain African species just might be the perfect catch.
Okay, he's a good size.
Right now we're using the Nile tilapia, and that's a very popular species to use for aquaponics. It's very easy to grow. It has a lot of tolerance to poor water quality, which for a beginning fish farmer might be an issue for them.
Oh, who's the TV star today?
Iowa State Extension helps local producers kickstart operations that seek value in the spaces between the traditional monoculture of corn and soybeans. Earl and Jeff Hafner operate Early Morning Harvest near Panora, Iowa. The father-son team says for generations in their family, farming is the only life they've ever known. Firmly rooted in their role as stewards of the land, the Hafners began to incorporate their vision of sustainability over a decade ago.
The whole farm's organic. Small grains, the wheat, the rye, the buckwheat, corn, soybeans, and also the pasture and forage for the cattle, because the cattle's organic. You have to protect the environment. You know, every farmer out here, you know, the soil is his life. You know, the plants and the animals are his life. Anything that destroys the environment would destroy his livelihood or his kids' future's livelihood.
After discovering aquaponics, Hafner helped pass his free time while serving in the military overseas by reading up on the subject. Noting the crucial value of water during his stint in the Middle East validated the importance of conservation to Hafner, and aquaponics presented an opportunity to keep precious resources from going to waste.
What I like about it is technically the only way water leaves this greenhouse is evaporation and transpiration. And that's the sustainable part of it. As water, we're in a drought now. As the world population gets bigger, water is the huge issue. We've been blessed here in the Midwest. We might experience some of how tough it is down in Texas and some of those places.
After receiving a grant from Iowa State to continue his work in aquaponics, Hafner took a hard look at the economics of the endeavor.
If you wanted to raise cattle, you went to the banker and said, I'm going to raise 100 head of cattle. He knew there's industry standards, he knew the numbers. And when I was looking at the numbers, it was tough to find numbers on it. So that's where I said, I'll open my books up. And my first year was rough.
Despite initial hurdles, Early Morning Harvest pressed on, learning from its mistakes. Refining methods over time allowed the Hafners to share their newfound expertise with others.
If you have a CSA and it's 2/3, 3/4 of a year, type operation. You could add a small aquaponics greenhouse to help fill the gap, maybe keep your labor year-round that way.
One of the nice things about aquaponics is that you can start very small and scale it up. Find your customer, find your client that's going to want your product, and as you've seen in this kind of system, you can create extremely high-value products.
For Market to Market, I'm Josh Bittner.
And you can watch this story again on Aquaponics on our Farmweek website, Facebook page, or YouTube. The website is farmweek.msucares.com. We'll also have a link to the Market to Market website where you can see the story as well as read the script. Remember, YouTube and Facebook fans, you see Farm Week stories first on Friday. We're also on Twitter at twitter.com/farmweek. Well, we are at the end of Farm Week for this week. On our next show, a Mississippi cattleman is seeking to grow beef for those who want it grass-fed and natural.
In our feature segment, Stonnington Farm of Perkinston, Mississippi, it's growing and marketing strictly grass-fed beef. The farm sells its beef fresh in a Hattiesburg store and over the internet to individuals.
We'll go to the field for a turn row talk on how to know when to stop irrigating your soybeans.
In the food factor, cereal may be an old standby for breakfast, but it's still a good one. See how to pick the right one for you.
In southern gardening, many people wouldn't describe the hibiscus as hardy, but there are varieties available, however, that can take the South's cold weather. Some have 12-inch flowers. Well, for the rest of the Farm Week crew, I'm Artis Ford.
And I'm Leighton Spann. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.